I want to start by asking you about something that Charlie Kirk said with great authority on his show, that separation of church and state is a fabrication and that it only was mentioned once by Thomas Jefferson in a letter. I would like to ask you, as someone who wrote a whole book about it, is that true, or what are the facts here?
Well, technically, I suppose it's true, but in a very, very narrow sense. And when we think about the First Amendment, which I think is America's best idea, I think it's important to consider what contemporaries thought they were doing when they formed the new nation. Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli reads, in part, as the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion.
Yeah.
And then it goes on, but that's the relevant portion. As the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. That's one bit of evidence. Second bit of evidence, and the one that Charlie Kirk is referring to, is a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a group of Baptists in Danbury, Connecticut, who were quizzing him on his understanding of this relationship between church and state. And it's a very famous letter known as the Danbury Letter, which he drafted on New Year's Day, 1802, as President of the United States, responding to the Danbury Baptists. And in that letter he said, I regard with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people that calls for the disestablishment of religion and freedom of religion. And then he goes on to say, thus establishing a wall of separation between church and state. So that's where the phrase separation of church and state comes from. And so in that very, very, very narrow sense, Charlie Kirk arguably is correct. But especially for people who claim to be originalists in their interpretation of the Constitution, I think it's important to understand how the founders themselves understood that very remarkable phrase in the First Amendment.
And over again in their letters and their notes and everything, they made it very clear that they thought freedom of religion meant disestablishment.
Absolutely.
Like that the government just stayed out of it.
Exactly.